This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Stick around to the end of the video for a special offer they're making available through my channel. This week, Yahtzee Crossshaw of The Escapist put out a piece titled, "Bad Games Are Better Than Bland Games." It's extremely relevant to this review, and rather than attempt to paraphrase an argument that he perfectly made, I will just play his words and hope The Escapist does not copy strike this video. Roll it, Austin.
Being bland is not quite the same thing as being bad, in my estimation. Bland is worse than bad. A lot worse. The only reason we play games or experience any kind of art is to make ourselves feel something, and even contempt and disgust are feelings. That being the case, the very worst thing a game can do is not provoke much feeling at all.
Rainbow Six Extraction is the absolute epitome of what Yahtzee is describing here, because I cannot think of a game that I have played in years, like actual years, that has evoked less in me. I feel dead inside when I play this. Like this game had somehow come along with an ice cream scoop and scooped out all the parts of my brain reserved for thinking or feeling or anything. This game is like some industrial grade Xanax that just powers down your brain for real. It's just so fucking boring, my god. It is so rare that I describe a game as boring these days, because most games try to do something, anything, and so even when that ambition fails, you can at least grapple with the ambition. You can at least go through the intellectual exercise of thinking about where the game tries but fails, either in its design goals or its technical execution or whatever. But this game, Rainbow Six Extraction, is not trying to do anything other than recoup its development cost. I swear to God, this should have been a free addition to Siege, because even as a standalone free-to-play title, this game does not have nearly enough legs to stand on its own 2 feet. The hard part about reviewing this game is that it's hard to call out any one part of it as being especially shit. Like with Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance, you could point to a ton of stuff that was broken or badly designed, and a really clear picture emerges about why that game was so bad, right? But here in Extraction, everything works. Everything is here that should be here. But there is this massive gaping hole at the center of it where the video game should be. Like it has levels and guns and enemies and progression menus and all of the things that video games have, but none of them have been combined to make an actual video game. It just feels like a really phoned in Siege asset flip. It feels like a bunch of custom maps loosely strung together. It feels like a mod from a solo developer, and that is really rude because I've played a lot of mods from solo developers that have way more ambition and that achieve way more than this does. And this is so wild because most of the things that this game does have, the graphics engine, the operators, the weapons, the customization, the destructible levels, all of that already existed in a different video game. This was not some scrappy dev team building assets from the ground up, and you can blame the failure of this game on how difficult it is to build modern day video games, because it is difficult. Hell, even from a design perspective, most of the work was already done here as well, 3 years ago in the Outbreak seasonal event. Just as this game lifts and drops operators and weapons from Siege, it also lifts and drops all of the enemies from that seasonal event, with only minor changes and minor additions. This game was born on the other side of the finish line, and it still found a way to come last place. It has all of the things that Rainbow Six Siege created and polished and refined and perfected, so all this game needed to do was innovate on top of that. All it had to do was create an interesting premise to pique our interest, maybe an interesting story to keep us engaged, certainly some interesting map design, interesting scenarios and objectives, interesting twists on the operator kits and weapons with which we're already so familiar. This game had one job: come up with some cool ideas. All of the technical work was already done. Most of the design work was done. All you needed to do was take all of that and then make a fun video game with it. And it's astounding how far short this game falls of that objective. Okay, so I should probably explain this game to you rather than just doing this whole exasperated monologue thing, so here goes. Rainbow Six Extraction is a standalone spin-off of Rainbow Six Siege. It is a slightly discounted title. It's selling for $80 Australian as opposed to the normal 100. It's available on Ubisoft's subscription service as well as Microsoft's Game Pass for PC and Xbox. If you're going to play it, I recommend doing so through Game Pass. but I don't recommend playing this at all. On top of its box price, there's also a cash shop that sells skins for like 20 bucks a pop. There's no boosters or anything in there yet, but Ubisoft always add gameplay affecting boosters post-launch, so expect them to add them here as well. It is a 3-player co-op game. You can play solo, but that's just you soloing a mission intended for 3 people. This is possible at lower difficulties, where the game is brain-dead easy, but later on, the game's objective structure and ammo economy would make solo play essentially impossible, especially for the endgame activity, which I'll discuss later. Long story short, this is only a co-op game. You can play with 2 friends, or you can matchmake, but there is no way this game retains an active player base after the first week, 2 weeks maybe, of launch. So if you are picking up this game a few months from now, be aware that matchmaking just probably won't work for you, and you will need to bring 2 friends in order to play it. When you begin, you are greeted with this cutscene depicting the arrival of the Archaeans, which are essentially just alien zombies. You play as a crack team of operators whose job it is to conduct research on the aliens. That means going into the areas where they've nested and completing operations like rescuing scientists or destroying nests or harvesting tissue samples, etc. The intention of each map is not to kill every enemy you see, but rather to complete the objective, and often the fewer enemies you kill, the better. The game does open strongly with this big cutscene and more fully voiced CG rendered cutscenes after that lead you to believe you're in for some sort of, mission-based adventure, with each new mission introducing you to new characters on the roster, and each cutscene filling in the missing pieces of the alien mystery, etc. That is not what happens. These cutscenes you get at the beginning are pretty much all you get. 15 hours later, and all I got were like 2 very brief vlog-like things that the characters were recording into their phones. I never met any other character on the roster. I never learned anything about the aliens whatsoever. Just a complete whiff top to bottom. And if you're at all hopeful that this might deliver some sort of interesting tactical sci-fi storyline, then allow me to disabuse you of that notion right now. There is nothing here, and given what this franchise used to do with story, and how interesting these operators are, and how little we see of their personalities and backstories in Siege, Extraction was the perfect opportunity to let both story and characterizations shine through, and like I said, complete whiff. You begin your journey in VR training, which doesn't take too long. The rules are simple. You get dropped on a map. The map always has 3 sections divided by airlocks, and in each of those sections is a randomly assigned objective. You complete one objective, like capturing an alien target, and then you can either extract, or you can continue to the next section for a higher XP reward. Doing all 3 sections allows you to extract by helicopter, but the risks increase each time as enemy density and difficulty increases, and also you don't regain health or ammo in between each section, so the attrition of your resources becomes the biggest threat. You also don't immediately regain all of your health when an operation is completed. If your operator takes a lot of damage, then they'll be out of action for 1 to 2 missions while they recover, forcing you to rely on other operators. If you are downed during a mission, you are covered in a protective foam and will be captured by the aliens. At that point, the operator is no longer available in your roster, and the only way to get them back is to rescue them. You will queue up for a round on the same map that your operator was downed, and one of the randomly chosen objectives will be a rescue op, where you need to pull your operator from this weird tree thing and then extract them via helicopter. Now, this roster health thing and this rescue op thing, these are basically the only 2 good ideas in this whole video game. The fact that your operator doesn't auto-heal does force you to jump between different operators rather than stick with old reliable 100% of the time. I was forced to learn kits I wasn't naturally drawn to because I kinda had to, and that's a good thing. Similarly, the whole rescue op thing is a very cool idea. It creates meaningful stakes for failure, both during the mission where you lose your operator, and during the mission when you go to rescue them. It really sucks when you mount a rescue op, but you can't get it done. Sucks in a good way, that is. The whole system, it works, and I hope other games copy it because I want to experience more of it. I just don't want to play any more of Extraction. We should definitely talk more about the overall structure of this game and how disappointing it is. You might come to it thinking it's some sort of linear, mission-based thing that has a sense of progression about it. You might conjure an image of the old Rainbow Six games that had, missions with sequences and levels with a start and an end and specific beats and set-piece moments throughout them. Extraction is not like that. The easiest way to think of Extraction is like a PvP game if you replaced human opponents with really dumb zombie aliens. So there are 4 regions, and each of those has 4 maps, and you basically just hit the quick play button to play. You can select individual maps if you want to, but most of the time you are just blindly hitting the quick play button, which will drop you onto a random map in a random area. These maps are not sequenced, structured, curated maps. They are essentially just multiplayer maps full of nondescript, reusable space that can be utilized for whatever random objective you happen to get. And this is not an exaggeration, okay? Sometimes you will load into a map and you will click on 5 things that are very nearby your spawn point, and then you will walk to the exit. That is the mission. It's over in less than 15 seconds. You spend more time prepping your character pre-deployment and then waiting in the airlock than you do playing the actual game. That is a more extreme example, but most of the objectives are similar to this. There are a pool of maybe 8 objective types, and some of them are so easy it is laughable. Even at the highest difficulty, which we did play through, these objectives are so easy that it feels like a complete waste of your time. The objective design itself is just not interesting in the first instance, and once you learn how this game works, you can do most of them with your eyes closed because there isn't enough variability built into the map design, objective design, or enemy design to make each encounter feel unique and interesting. 15 hours deep, my memories of this game are just one big amorphous haze because every moment was just the same as every other moment. Easiest difficulty, hardest difficulty, this objective, that objective, the Alaska map, the New Mexico map, it all felt the same. When I had seen the reveal of this game, I had really imagined like curated, structured, sequenced missions like the old Rainbow Six games, but also like contemporary co-op shooters like Left 4 Dead or Back 4 Blood or Aliens Fireteam Elite. None of that is here. It's just really phoned in multiplayer style gameplay awkwardly grafted onto a PvE framework. It sucks. And even if you were to take it on its own premise, other games have done this so much better. Like Deep Rock Galactic, for example, is similar to Extraction in that it doesn't have a story or scripted missions, and it's recycling the same objectives over and over again, but Deep Rock figured out how to make that feel different and fun every time. Extraction has not figured that out, especially the fun part. The repetitive objective design is just one thing, but the map design is just as bad. Even though there are 4 locations where missions play out, they all feel exactly the same. Any single Siege map has more identity than all of the Extraction maps combined. You might look and see differences between them here in this footage, but they all play the exact same way, without exception. It's like each new location is a fresh coat of paint applied to the same scaffolding. As much as they lack identity, they are also structurally weaker. A big part of Siege was verticality, multi-story levels with roofs that you rappel off, floors that you can shoot through and drop down. You had to think in 3 dimensions when playing Siege. You don't have to do that here. Almost everything exists on the ground floor, so to speak, and when there are elevation changes, you can't really use them to your strategic advantage. There's no rappelling at all, for example. There are very few ceilings or floors you can shoot through. It's just so flat, and it feels like such a massive downgrade versus one of Siege's biggest strengths. So, in practical terms, I was bored with this game within the first hour that I played it, and then I played it for another 14 hours. Don't imagine that your 15th hour is markedly different from your first, because it's not. It's all played on the same maps, fighting the same enemies, doing the same objectives. I can't think of many games that have provided a less meaningful and less satisfying sense of progression. That's not to say that there isn't any progression, because there is. You start on moderate difficulty, which is the first of 4. One of the things that's going to hurt this game even more than everything that I've already described is that you're locked to these lower difficulties until you rack up a bunch of XP, at which point you can unlock the second, the third, and finally the fourth. It takes about 4 to 5 hours worth of play to get through these bottom 2 difficulties, and they are mind-numbingly easy. Like, such that I really expect most people will just step off this game because they pose so little challenge. People will just be like, what is this? You can totally just brute force your way through objectives at these difficulties. And I would actually say that the game doesn't work at those difficulties because that brute force style of play is so antithetical to what this game is trying to achieve, at least most of the time. Things do improve when you hit the 3rd and 4th difficulties. At that point, you can't just run in and aggro everything because you'll be overwhelmed, so you need to take things slow, scout your surroundings, plan your approach, and work as a team. You have to be tactical here because if you play this like Left 4 Dead, it doesn't work, mostly. But even then, at those highest difficulties, there are still so many things that ruin this experience. Those really easy objectives I listed earlier are one example. You can finish some missions in seconds, and it's like, how did that make it through testing? you can learn very quickly how easy it is to take down most enemy types and arrive at strategies and loadouts that trivialize some of the more challenging objectives. The scout drone, for example, can just light up every single target on the map as you roll through, so you don't even need to press a button to mark them, by the way. It literally just auto tags them, and then you can see them all with X-ray vision, completely reducing the need to like look around with your eyes in the... Oh man, it's just... Stun grenades, like you get so many of them and they allow you to just instantly KO even the biggest, most dangerous enemies. Like, the game works at these difficulties, sure. It's just that the solutions to each of the objectives and enemy types are universal, and so you just get into a rhythm about how to do it all, and then you just go through the motions over and over and over again. We finished all the standard missions on the hardest difficulty, and we felt no desire to play any more of them. There are 2 additional game modes though. Wait till you see these. Okay, so the first is called Wall to Wall, and this is essentially just a zombie horde mode. In standard maps, you can stop enemies from spawning, but in these maps, enemies just come at you in endless waves. It's available at the hardest difficulty only. We did it on our first try, maybe our second. It's just super mindless. Like, the beauty of Siege was these operators and their kits and the levels and the tension and the strategy. All of that is completely thrown out the window in this game mode. It's just mindless shooting. Sure, it's different, but it's the opposite of what the rest of this game is trying to be. And when none of your game systems are lined up in service of that, then yeah, of course it's not going to work. That's not the only example of that, by the way. There are boss encounters in the main missions where you fight doppelganger operators, like, you know, an alien version of Sledge or Smoke or Alibi or whatever. These bosses are just bullet sponges. That is all they are. Like, this whole game is trying to get you to be slow and methodical and cautious and strategic, but then all of a sudden it throws an enemy at you that you just mindlessly shoot for 5 minutes until it is dead. Like, I cannot imagine a more out of place boss encounter for this video game than this. So the last game mode is called Maelstrom, and it takes you a while to grind up to this, like probably at least 12 plus hours depending on how well you're doing. I had no idea what this was, but this game had shown me so little to this point that I was secretly hoping that this game mode would deliver something truly unique and worth playing, as though the rest might have been some kind of prolonged leveling tutorial experience, but that the real game begins here. You know exactly how this story ends. So, this game mode is 9 missions back to back. Your average map is 3 missions back to back, and all this mode is do 9 missions back to back. That is it. This doesn't happen in a new location. There are no new maps. There are no new enemy types. There are no new objectives. There are no new modifiers. There's nothing new. It's just do the same shit 9 times in a row. You can only do this on the hardest difficulty, but the first 3 missions are essentially gimmies since they're the easiest objective types, and they're only 1-star rated, so they're just cakewalks. We got to the end of the 2-star rated missions, so we got, up to 6 of 9, and then we died because the game just starts throwing a stupid number of enemies at you and starving you of ammo and health and all that sort of shit. The best part is that all 9 of these missions happen within the same area. So it's a 3-map rotation, and you go through it once, and when you've done that, then you go through the same 3 maps again. Only this time, all of the enemies have been moved around, and the objectives are different. Like, they couldn't even bounce you between different locations while doing this. They just make you go in a literal circle, do 3 maps 3 times each. The reward for this, by the way, is a hat. If you clear all of it, you get like the diamond hat. We got the silver hat, and that was enough for us since we were all just very excited to uninstall the game by that point anyway. That is the entirety of Rainbow Six Extraction. It is a roster of operators already available in another game, a suite of enemies you've already fought in a free seasonal event, a set of maps with no identity, a set of repetitive mission objectives that quickly wear out their welcome, and a set of endgame game modes that are either at odds with the core gameplay or are just so phoned in that they might as well not exist at all. If I was to diagnose the critical flaw of this game, it's that Ubisoft did not figure out a set of enemies and scenarios that push back on the player the same way a player-controlled operator does in Siege. There are no strategic enemies in this game. There are only enemy numbers, health, and brute force. There is no enemy with a kit anywhere near as nuanced as an operator's kit. None who can keep you on your toes or introduce a random unexpected element to the flow of missions the way that PvP foes are constantly doing in Siege. In the absence of that, the game just devolves into you sneaking around with full view of the enemy, silently assassinating them with ease, and then mowing them down in mindless horde-style gameplay when it's time to party. There is an essential middle ground that is missing here, and that oversight is terminal. I feel like every review I do of a Ubisoft game, I have this little speech that I do about how Ubisoft's reputation for churning out copy and pasted garbage isn't entirely fair. And I'm like, well look, Far Cry is pretty copy and paste, but Mario Rabbids is a goddamn masterpiece. And Assassin's Creed may be too long, but it's anything but lazy. They're genuinely trying to do stuff there. And I'd be like, okay, so Ghost Recon Breakpoint was a fucking disaster, but Immortal Phoenix Rising was one of my games of the year. And while we're on the topic, Riders Republic was really fun too, and I quite admired Watch Dogs Legion for its ideas and its ambition, even though it wasn't quite as fun as it should have been. So I have that little speech, but Rainbow Six Extraction is so bad, so phoned in, so bereft of ideas and effort, that I cannot in good conscience deliver that speech this time around. I can't believe that a dev team worked for more than 4 years on this. I can't believe that Ubisoft thought that this would be enough to justify an $80 price tag and microtransactions on top. This is the nadir of Ubisoft's recent release portfolio. I mean, Breakpoint was terrible because it epitomized Ubisoft's homogenized game design, where every franchise had to eventually morph into a loot-based RPG so that they could monetize that loot system. But at least they were trying to do something, even if it was shitty. This just feels like a game that was stuck in development hell for years, and it emerged at the end of that with only the things that Rainbow Six Siege had bequeathed it, and nothing of substance to add on top of that. Seeing the state of this, I'm not surprised that Ubisoft dropped the price and pushed it onto Game Pass, because Ubisoft have internal feedback systems as well, and all of those systems must have been blinking red as this was nearing release. This is a new low for Ubisoft, and as I played through it, I could only think about how much dev time and talent must have been wasted to create it. And I wonder what those individuals could have done and could have created had they been given the freedom to make something, anything, other than this. I do not recommend Rainbow Six Extraction. Guys, it's 2022. It's time to make realistic New Year's resolutions. None of this eat healthy, go for a jog, take better care of myself nonsense. None of that's going to happen. So here's my New Year's resolution. Watch more TV. I'm not even joking, by the way. I still have not finished Hawkeye, and I haven't even started The Witcher Season 2. If you are like me, then you may want to consider the likes of Surfshark VPN. Surfshark lets you access geolock streaming content. Want to watch stuff on Netflix that isn't available in your country? Use Surfshark to access Netflix and other streaming platforms without having to worry about any of that region lock nonsense, all in just a few simple clicks. That's not all though. Surfshark is the best means of protecting your online data. Your passwords, your IP address, your personal information. Surfshark VPN encrypts your online data, protecting you from identity thefts and hacks, and their clean web feature automatically blocks over 1 million known malicious websites, phishing methods, and other threats. You can use Surfshark on multiple devices at once, which is something that almost no other VPN allows. It's available on pretty much every platform you can think of. It has 24/7 customer support, and it has a full 30-day money-back guarantee. Best of all, they're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, giving you a massive 83% discount and 3 months free when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Click the link in the description below or visit surfshark.deals/skillup. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.